You know, I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's just something about original PlayStation 1 games that give me this nostalgic feeling every time I play them. Which is weird because, well, I never had a PlayStation 1 or 2 when I was younger. I was a Nintendo kid through and through, and despite Sony being my preferred game publisher and console producer as of the last decade or so, I actually didn't get my hands on my first PlayStation console until the PS3 in September of 2009. My father originally bought it for the family because it came with a built-in Blu-ray player, but he also went to the trouble of buying 2 games for the system for me to enjoy when we initially got it: Star Wars The Force Unleashed and Tiger Woods PGA Tour 2009. Yeah, I'm sure you can guess which game I ended up playing more of. Even still, I was well aware of what the original PlayStation was like due to my experiences at some of my friends' houses. I had many peers during my preschool years that owned PlayStation 1s, which is how I came to learn of games like Spyro 2 and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, both of which eventually led to me wanting to get Enter the Dragonfly and Tony Hawk's Underground 2 on the GameCube. I also distinctly remember one kid I went to preschool with having Buzz Lightyear of Star Command on his PS1. That game absolutely amazed me when I went over to his house to play it the one day. For years, I wanted to get that game for myself because of how much fun I had chasing down Nosferatu in that forest level. Unfortunately though, I never came across it because I didn't get my first video game console until my parents got me a GameCube for Christmas in 2003. And as a result, I still haven't played that game to this very day. Although, I certainly want to, but at this point, I may as well just wait until I want to make a video on it. But that's a subject for another day. Today's video is on Dexter's Laboratory, Mandark's Lab for the original PlayStation, and now I can express that the real reason I went on this long-winded tangent about my childhood experience with the PS1 was to set up the fact that I could have sworn I've played this game before, but I cannot for the life of me remember when and where. It's possible it could have been at one of these kids' houses that owned a PlayStation, or perhaps I ended up playing it at the rec center that used to have video game consoles set up for kids to play in the town my family had moved to at the end of April in 2002. I feel like it's more likely that I ended up playing it there, but I have no way of confirming this. I just know, I swear for a fact, that I have played this game before, but I can't remember when it happened. Anyways, that's a personal crisis that I'll need to solve on my own time. For now, let's just get what to most of you probably came here for. So the first thing I would like to address is that Mandark's Lab is a misleading title because ultimately when it comes down to it, the game still takes place in Dexter's lab, it's just that Mandark takes it over in order to screw with Dexter in every way possible. Whether he be locking Dexter out entirely, implanting viruses in his computer, turning him old, it all ultimately comes down to messing with Dexter in every way he possibly can in order to discourage him as much as possible and ultimately win out over their little rivalry that they've got going on. The entire plot of the game can basically be summed up as much as seeing that the game is sectioned off into 4 parts. The first requires Dexter to regain access to his lab now that Mandark has reconfigured the voice recognition module, but in order to do that, Dexter needs to beat Dee Dee in a dancing competition and creep into her room and fight off cooties just like that one episode of the show, to find the actual device that will allow him to modify his voice. Once he regains access to his lab, he then needs to reboot his computer and security system, so to do that, he has to shrink down to the size of an atom and eliminate these rogue particles. And he needs to send himself into virtual reality to squash this bug that's running around in his system. Both are very Dexter-like in the way they conceptualize computer jargon into cartoony minigames. After Dexter gets his systems back online, Mandark comes across Dexter's aging ray and ends up blasting him up 70 years into an elderly man. Thus, you're stuck wandering around Dexter's lab with a cane in the third area while you go to these battery recharging stations and relive old memories in order to power them back up again. Both of which are references to the show once again in the form of the derby car race and the dodgeball arcade shooter. And then last but not least, in the final section of Dexter's lab, once he's returned to normal, he takes on Mandark in 2 head-to-head challenges with the stipulation that if Dexter wins, Mandark will give him the code to disengage the TNT set to explode this aquarium and flood his laboratory, but if Mandark wins, Dee Dee has to give him a kiss. In the end, Dexter ends up winning, but Mandark gives him a faulty code anyway. However, Dexter, being the boy genius that he is, didn't need the code because the other challenges between gave him enough time to crack it and disable the explosives regardless. Thus, Mandark escapes in frustration while Dee Dee goes about her usual destructive tendencies. And as you can see by the cutscenes of this game, a big disappointing factor is the fact that there weren't any exclusive or original hand-drawn animated sequences created for it. Instead, they just took cells and sequences from the show, cut and redubbed over top of them, and stitched what they could together to fit the narrative of this game. For the most part, it looks fine, but the lip syncing falls into that awkward in-between of sometimes syncing up but not always, and some of the edits look really poor because you can tell the cells are over top of a different background compared to the original scene that they were drawn for.
System now back to alert level 0.
The sweet sound of its technology always warms my heart.
I made a comment during my Disaster Strikes video about wanting a giant open Dexter's Lab video game where you can wander around his gargantuan lab and come across all sorts of cool inventions and side distractions every which way. Some people pointed me towards this game when I brought that up, and while this is certainly a step in the right direction, it's still not quite what I had in mind. See, this game is essentially boiled down to 8 different minigames that are chain linked together by 4 sectioned off hub worlds inside Dexter's Lab. It's not an expansive landscape with giant levels akin to the likes of 3D platformers. In fact, Dexter can't jump at all. The only thing you can do in the hub worlds is walk around and interact with things labeled by question marks. No enemies, no platforming, no puzzles to solve. The only things to do are complete minigames in each area and collect these blueprints scattered around the lab. When all 4 blueprints of a particular area are acquired, you unlock these special power-ups that give you an advantage in the minigames for that particular area. Of course, during my first playthrough I didn't get any of these and was able to beat them just fine, but I imagine that these are a good way of counterbalancing some challenges for younger players who may find something too difficult. Getting the optional objective to make things easier is a fair way of keeping the game fun for those players. I at least think the graphics of the game look accurate to the show, although Dexter's face can sometimes be a little off. Either way, it's still cool getting to walk around Dexter's house and lab in a 3D environment after having seen so many episodes of the show. The faithfulness of this game is pretty good. There are loads of references here to episodes that hardcore Dexter's Lab fans would get a kick out of seeing, so I can't complain too much. The ever so quotable grandpa line from the episode where Dee Dee messes with Dexter while he's an old man is embedded in here too. And TV's Action Hank even appears on the television set in Dexter's living room. The only disappointing thing I've noticed was a distinct lack of Monkey and Agent Honeydew, or even the Justice Friends. It would have been cool if there was a 5th sequence in between sections 2 and 3 where the intermission of the series took over and there was a minigame for Monkey and another for Major Glory, Val Hallen, and the infraggable Krunk. But hey, missed opportunities. Mandark's lab also features an option in the startup menu to access Dexter's Vault, an area that the player can access to view different pieces of concept art that were used while producing the original episodes of Dexter's Lab. This is a really cool feature, especially from back in the day when the internet was still getting its footing, because it acts as a way for a Dexter's Lab fan to get a sneak peek at the production behind the show. The vault starts completely locked when you first start up the game, but as the player progresses and makes more advancements, more concept art will begin to become available. My personal favorite of the ones I was able to unlock during my playthrough was this caricature of series creator Genndy Tartakovsky enduring all of these different poses while he attempts to work on the show. That was cool. I suppose when it boils down to it, all that's really left to talk about now is each of the minigames, so I'll proceed to just go through each of them one by one in the order I played them and share my thoughts on each, because trust me, some of these are kind of fun and others are a chore to get through. First up, we've got Dee Dee's dancing minigame, and let me just say right off the bat, it disappoints me greatly that this wasn't a Dance Dance Revolution parody called DDR. Boy, am I funny. Thank you. This one's pretty straightforward, just press the corresponding button on screen in time with the beat. The more precise you are to the music, the better your score. Given that I'm not a rhythm game aficionado, I didn't really enjoy these games given the simplicity of it. It's just a basic timing game with Dexter and Dee Dee dancing in the background. Didn't have any trouble beating it, but still not a game I'm interested in. Next. Second up, we have a more arcade-styled shooter game in which you traverse Dee Dee's room in search of Dexter's voice modifier, all the while fighting off these cooties with your aerosol can. You've got a limited amount of pesticide that you can spray before your can runs out, and your goal is to eliminate all of the cooties on screen before they attack you and deal damage. Thankfully though, after each round you're given roughly 15 seconds to mash the circle and X buttons back and forth to shake the can and refill your ammo. So it's not like you have to last all 5 rounds on one can's worth of spray. This one was fun, albeit a bit unwieldy in the controls. That can be said for a lot of these though. It always feels like the reticle is too slippery and slides further than you want it to in a particular direction. It's a fun game, although I'm certain it would be more fun in an arcade setting where you could use something like a Wiimote or a pointer at the screen to aim more accurately. Following these 2 challenges, you're taken to the second section of the game where you have to fight off the rogue atoms that are interfering with Dexter's security system in a spaceship minigame where you fly around an arena blasting these deformed atoms as they try to attack you. The control is a bit slippery and it took me a second to realize that you need to stun them when their eyes are closed by doing the slam attack, but once I figured that out, the rest of it was pretty easy. They are relentless though, and I did come close to failing a few times, but it's still a decent enough game. The other challenge though is a bit odd, probably the most peculiar one of the entire set. In this minigame, you're tasked with chasing around this bug that's running rampant inside Dexter's computer. You're given a giant fly swatter and the objective of smashing this freaky bug with its excessively long and thin humanoid legs 5 times, all the while avoiding obstacles along the path. For some reason though, the bug drops this yellow goop-like liquid that somehow nets you bonus points when you pick it up. I don't know what it's supposed to be or why Dexter benefits from it, but at the same time, I don't want to know. Section 3 then takes us to Old Man Dexter reliving his past memories, which consist of a derby car race in which you race against Racer D, and a dodgeball minigame that plays even more like an arcade shooter than the Cootie minigame did. The former sees you racing along 3 overhead tracks as you need to beat out Racer D within 5 laps, while picking up items along the way a la Mario Kart along the course and using your boost when necessary. This one was fun, probably my favorite in the whole game, but I can't deny that the controls are still undeniably slippery once again, and I for the life of me couldn't figure out what the tires power up was supposed to do. I figured it would either give you more traction, which would lead to better control, or it would allow you to drive on rough terrain without slowing down, but honestly, I never noticed a difference for either of those things while it was active. It's still a fun game all around, however, so regardless of that, it was a good time. I'm also partial to kart racers though, so this appeals more to me specifically. The other game is based on the Dodgeball episode and sees you playing as Dexter through a first-person perspective as you try to knock out all of the other kids trying to smash into you with the face of a dodgeball. This one's fine. I think some of the targets can be difficult to hit, but you have unlimited ammo and can just mash the throw button as much as you want, so you'll be able to keep consistently trying through it all. I preferred the Cooties minigame to this one personally, but it's not bad. I could see somebody going either way on these. And then, last but not least, we have 2 challenges against Mandark. The first is the same exact rhythm game as the one against Dee Dee, except this time, instead of coming down in a vertical line, the icons come from all 4 sides of the screen. Still, that's not much of a difference to justify having 2 versions of what is essentially the same game, so honestly, this kind of feels like some corners were cut with the inclusion of this one. The other game, though, is air hockey, and feels more like the true final challenge of the game. The rules are simple. First person to score 5 goals wins, and while I was incredibly nervous the AI was going to be brutal when Mandark scored the first goal on me, I immediately came back and scored 5 in a row on him, so in all reality, the CPU wasn't as difficult as I feared it would be. Still though, this is a good final challenge. Would have been cooler if the rhythm game was replaced with a mech battle or something, but alas, that was not the case. In the end, I think most of these games are serviceable, but yeah, the control is certainly slippery across the entire board. A good comparison to this would be something like Sonic Heroes, where the characters constantly seem to be flying around all over the place when you need to get your bearings straight. My biggest fixes would be to stiffen the control just a little bit and replace the second timing game with something else, but otherwise, I can't really complain. It's a minigame compilation on the PS1. Standards for that aren't particularly high, and it does its job pretty well. None of the games are frustrating or terribly difficult to complete, so yeah, it does its job. Ultimately, I think Mandark's Lab is a fine enough game for what it is. A glorified minigame collection with a Dexter's Lab overworld to glue things together. At the very least, the game tried to have a story and link these games together in a campaign mode at all. I mean, it would have been extremely disappointing to just have a compilation of these games on a menu screen and leave it at that, so those extra features and enhancements to the presentation are much appreciated. I certainly enjoyed this game more than Robot Rampage and Chess Challenge, that's for sure, but I would still say Disaster Strikes is the most fulfilling Dexter's Lab video game out there. That one actually leans into having the player explore Dexter's Lab and complete these objectives, which is ultimately what I feel a Dexter's Lab video game is best suited for. I mean, if someone was given the chance to go into the show, what do you think is the first thing they'd want to do? Explore the lab, that's the entire appeal. It's a shame we never got a 3D game that fully fleshed out this idea, but I suppose given the technology available at the time when this show was around, it might have been a tall order for the 5th console generation to handle. Oh well. I'm still grateful for what we got. That's just about going to do it for this video, however, and it also completes my coverage on the Dexter's Lab video games, aside from the unreleased one and the mobile one, which I have no way of recording. So next up, I'll be returning once again to the sister cartoon of Dexter's Lab, the Powerpuff Girls, this time around for Chemical Extraction, released, oh, how about that, on the PS1 and Nintendo 64. Hope you guys are looking forward to it, and until next time, Shadowstreak, signing off.